Yes, Arnie's whole beef halves we deliver. All right.
Offer not good in sector R or N after curfew.
You're good.
Yeah, here we are.
Down to 5.
All right.
Uh-oh.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, 1600. We have quite a cast of characters here today,
Quite.
large crew. We have with us Paul Sears and Dave Newhouse from the Muffins and Keith Maxud from Present. Otherwise known as, at least for today and what you're going to see, the Maximalists. Explain the concept of the Maximalists to us, please.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I'd like to know that myself, actually.
Well, back in 2002, after I'd met Keith back at the Prague Day Festival in 2002, which was the Muffin's second appearance there, I met Keith, and
I met Paul.
And he gave me a copy of the latest Present album that he was on, High Infidelity, which was just an awesome record. And
Is that a plug?
I really liked his bass playing,
Buy it now.
product positioning here.
Shameless.
I really liked his bass playing,
Nobody
and
has one anymore, though.
I actually conned him into coming down to Baltimore and just playing with me, just the two of us. And so we did that for a couple of years, off and on, playing at my house. And we got on well, and I forget which one of us suggested it, but we just decided we'd go out and do some shows. And we discussed we bounced ideas back and forth of like who else would we invite to play with us, and it would obviously have to be somebody that was an improviser, because that's what we do, is 100% improvisation. And so since '02, we did our first show in '04, and since then we've had probably 5 different versions of the band. It's been Keith and I, and a rotating cast of characters, of which Dave is a repeat
Customer.
A repeat. He's been a repeat offender in the band, and we were bouncing around the ideas for names, and RIO Speedwagon wasn't cutting it. So
No, that wasn't going to happen.
Not after the
I was reading something someplace about minimalist improvisation, and then it just a little character on my shoulder said Maximalist improvisation, and that's been it ever since.
But what about the
2004.
extra E and the Max?
That
That's his
actually
thing.
was
He
Mike.
came up with
That
that.
was Mike Potter's doing. He did it, and I just looked good, so
So was that a typo, or he did that on purpose?
that was an embellishment of Mike's on his
Okay.
own.
Not a typo,
So-
an embellishment.
So it's an improv, loosely structured, kind of
Completely
pick up,
improvisational. Yes.
whatever.
Completely
Yeah, but,
improvisational.
actually, we are. This is the 3 of us are really the core, because when I first came down, the first thing that you did was with Dave that we played to.
That's true. This is true.
So that was you and he on the tape that or CD,
right,
whether
right,
it was
right.
digital
There
or
you go.
what, but that we played to. The original concept was that we would write something and then it would be composed material. I came down and we would do these improvisations of stuff that we thought we were going to transcribe. And then it got more and more involved and complex, and then we said, we agreed that, we work well together, let's do something, and I kept driving down from New York endlessly, tirelessly.
Right, still does.
Yeah. So cruising down, and
Right.
after about 3 times that we got together, just the 2 of us, we decided to include anybody that was willing, basically.
Yeah, that we liked.
And,
we would just discuss. We'd bounce ideas back and forth and say, yeah, this person would work, and we'd have them over, or just sometimes
Now,
not even
how
do
does how does that work differently from the bands that you guys are normally in? Is it a stretch, or is it?
It's a
Well,
joy.
it's a joy. Yeah, we cut out the middleman practice.
Our motto is all fun, no work. 'Cause there's no rehearsal, which is wonderful.
You missed last night's rehearsal.
See, I know.
We do rehearse.
And I'm still kicking myself about that, but I caught up today, I thought.
But generally, the fun thing is that with the Muffins, quite a bit of our material is 100% improvisation, and maybe a half or better is through composed, and requires centuries of rehearsal to learn.
As all music does.
Yeah, as all music does. And I'll let Keith can speak for Prezant.
True.
Oh, well, that's not the only other thing. I am doing
Yes.
a similar project where I get together with some musicians I played with for many years, one of which is my oldest and longest friend who I've played music with for over 35 years now. And he's an incredible composer and an incredible musician. And when he writes something, it's just impossible to to do immediately. So we do an improvisational thing. We've been doing it now for like 8 years with that group that I'm working with, and it's very similar, not in material to what we're doing with the Maximalists, but the same kind of concept, 3 musicians or more. We invite others to come in and play with us. But just, every week it's a different thing. We try to call it our weekly discipline, but scheduling old men like us, it gets harder and harder. So if we make it twice a month, that's good.
He's a big, jam band fan.
Oh,
Now-
yeah. Noodling.
Yeah, that's. But there's definitely a difference between the stuff that you listen to and the
I don't
stuff
know.
that they're playing.
I don't know. I saw a band open for Pearl Jam once that was very similar to what you guys have been doing, and kind of sounded to me like early Pink Floyd when they used to sit around and just jam to a light show. So yeah, I'm the guy that likes. I like to see it going in 40 different directions at once.
Well, there are a lot of bands out there that do that do the jamming, that do that fall into the jam band category, but most of them are starting out with some structure,
Right.
And whereas we start out with no.
Yeah, they take
structure.
a song, do the first two verses,
There you
go
are.
haywire, and then
Yeah,
come back.
exactly. They have some plan, whereas we don't. We have no plan.
Right.
The joy of this band is we're all used to playing with and working on very detailed, very complex composed music. And
That influences the ideas anyway, so a lot of the ideas are coming from very written forms, very structured ideas. It's just music, but we're working with that. We're not we're using so many sonic influences in the sound with effects or devices or just sounds not relating to intervals or.
Now, why no
it's-
guitar? Or is
Oh,
that
we
something-
play with guitarists often.
We've used 3 guitar players before. We just opted not to. We just opted to keep this simple.
Okay.
That's all. No, we've worked with Yanni Papadopoulos from Stinking Lizaveta. He is a part-time maximalist.
what's your language now?
Mark
Yeah, man,
Stanley.
family show.
Mark
He's a
Stanley has
PG.
been with us. He was with my band Chainsaw Jazz back in the day, and was with me in 9353 briefly. And we also worked with Rick Iannacona, who's a fine guitar player from Philadelphia who works with Jamaluddin Takuma, the bass player, and a whole host of other people. And that band New Ghost, that
It just
Keith has
depends
also
on-
worked with.
On the lineup at the time, I think, the instrumentation is changing all the time, which is also an aspect of it that's real exciting. And the improvising in this particular format is very exciting because we don't know. We get up there and we have no idea what we're going to do. There's nothing talked out. It's like if you can make an analogy to a tightrope walker or something. There's no net. If we fall hard, But if we get across, it's very exciting and very rewarding.
That's a lot of fun. You feed off the audience. We listen to each other, and every show is customized for that audience, which is why we brought an audience today, so we'd have some people to play to.
Yeah, we've done the stories on or shows on jazz rock, and the difference between jazz rock and fusion, and and even progressive and stuff. Progressive doesn't mean what it used to mean, although it kind of still does. How do you categorize this?
Yeah, I think something like progressive is still evolving, and they're all evolving, and we're all just the sum of our parts. So we listen to all of that. All of us listen to all of that stuff. It's in the background, and it has a tendency to ooze out through through what we're doing.
Yeah, and 30 years ago, there were no, they didn't have those pat little niches for progressive music that they have now. The word prog didn't even exist, when we were
Outside of
doing the
Czechoslovakia.
correct, outside of Czechoslovakia. But nowadays the people aren't happy unless they can pigeonhole you into a little niche
Yeah, and
and
I
make
think
you're a symphonic prog band, you're an avant prog band, you're a neo prog band, you're a this prog band, you're a that prog band. It's like, to me, it's either good or it isn't.
Yeah, I think all the labels, it's nice to hear, and there actually is finally a station that plays a lot of different, modern stuff and older stuff, and crosses over some barriers. But I think the death of rock music in the late '70s was when everything had to get pigeonholed into your punk, your classic rock, your prog rock, your some flavor and other. And I hear influences in your music that remind me more like John Coltrane, free jazz, interstellar space.
Well, those were a lot of the influences. Not all of our, getting back to what you said about this pigeonholing thing, and this is something that yeah, our influences came before all of this pigeonholing of defining, types of music, whether it was jazz. There were these sort of groups of music, as composed music came under this classical music, and in that was a lot of 20th century music. Here we're getting into all these like labels also again, but then there was a lot of jazz influences, a lot of rock influences. Progressive music then did mean something different, but I think to those who were influenced from that music back then, it still means the same thing, which is, advancing, not stricter
Exploring.
divisions, but really moving it to the next step, progressing it. And I think that's what we're still doing.
Yeah, and part of the fun with the Maximalists is that we don't try to present the group as being anything except what it is when you hear the band. We don't tell people it's a free jazz band or we're a prog rock band, although we have done gigs with Mellotrons and Mini Moogs. We've also done gigs with Marshall Allen from the Sun Ra Orchestra, and so on. And we've had a lot of different people in the band, and every time we play, it's a different feel, and it's just an awful lot of fun.
You ever get that one show every once in a while where you go, ah, man, we hit this one out of the park? Or do you feel that most nights?
I feel it with pieces that we do now and then. I think they really work. Some of them really work well. Some of them really don't work well. It's always an accident,
That's what makes it exciting. Though.
The Muffins, our last release, Love Letter Number 2, basically grew out of some sessions that we were doing with Noel Scott and Marshall Allen from the Sun Ra Orchestra, and they came and played on 2 tracks for our album Double Negative that were composed parts, and then while we had them, we spent the rest, an entire day just improvising in the studio with the Muffins and these 2 guys, and we kept all that material, and then we went back and wrote parts and added things to the pieces that we had improvised to give the illusion of compositions, and we put that whole album was based on improvisation, and that's good fun, and we're hoping someday to accumulate enough quality material with the Maximalists to also have a Maximalists release in a similar fashion, although I doubt that we'll go back and add things to it.
But it'll be out before Chinese democracy.
Right.
It'll be out before American democracy.
Yeah, there you go. Now, in the heat of improv, and you're talking about when he was asking whether you have those nights where you feel you hit it and you go, yeah, there were parts here. Do you have that third mind take over? You ever get that telepathy?
Oh,
that
absolutely.
Just,
That's the whole thing. That's what makes it work.
Right.
That's the glue.
For me, that's what keeps me going.
How do
That's
you
what keeps me coming back?
How do you develop that other than just doing it and listening?
That's it. You just play.
I have no
Good
idea.
diet is really important.
It seems it's like magic to me. I have no idea. It's like you play with people long enough, and really you do get a telepathy between them, and sometimes I can only speak for myself. When I played with the Maximalists, for every concert there are those moments when you're in this other place. It's some other place. I don't even know what I'm doing up here. I don't know where I am, but I'm somewhere with these guys, and it's just an extraordinary feeling. And it's very hard to describe, and that really only comes about when you're doing when we're doing improvised music like this. I think because there's no start. You don't know where you're going with it. You're all composing it right there, ensemble, as a group, and it's just extraordinary. I think when that happens.
And the fun part for me is playing live, and we play a lot at a place in Baltimore called Orion Sound Studios. And one of the big side benefit of playing there is the guy that runs the place. If he's in the right mood, he'll record your show to 24-track DA80. To the Tascam DAT multi-track, and then the big fun for me is at the end of the night when we've completely forgotten what we've played, and then 2 or 3 weeks later I go back to Mike and we listen to it, and it's like, wow, for me that's like half the reason I do it is so that I can go back and hear what we did, right? Because we have really at the end of the show it's like you know, hey guys, you really played those songs well. You know?
What were they again?
We will know when we hear the tapes.
Do you guys ever have like a specific like rhythm that you go, okay, we've built off this before, so let's kind of
Definitely
go back to it and then
Yeah,
take it the
that's-
other
Yeah,
direction?
yeah. There's a few
recognition
a few drum beats
ideas,
that I
yeah.
do that I use repetitively because he immediately these
doesn't
guys
know any
immediately
others, no.
but these guys know immediately what to do and they know where the beats are going to be.
Yeah, we
but
think,
that's very
oh,
few.
no, not that again.
Yeah,
Let's not
really.
doing
But
that
there's
again.
very
Yeah, but we approach it
How can we
differently every time.
screw
It's
it up
never the
this
same.
time?
If he's
Yeah.
doing something that's the same as he's done in the past, or if I'm doing
Yeah.
something that is a reference, we'll do different things to it. We're not going to do the same thing that, like, for instance, when Paul and I started doing these improvisations into recordings, and then we were trying to transcribe them, there's a lot of stuff, you know, that I'll play that still refers to that, but he doesn't play to it the same way, and I don't play to any of the ideas that he put down back then. This was 4 or 5 years ago.
You're
It's always
listening to the
different.
space that's created between the other two guys and trying to fill in, or do you?
That's a huge part of it is listening to what the other people are half the job is like somebody walks up to me and says, well, what are you doing? Well, about half of it is playing and half of it is listening.
Yeah, getting back to that you said about the sort of telepathy thing,
Yeah.
it's individual and it's a group thing. It's mutual because we all have played our instruments for so long. We have this freedom to let these ideas come out, and then the thing is if it is listening and it is, you know, really paying attention to what each other are doing, because if you're, sometimes it works when you're alone and you're separated from that. You can be really, you know, stubborn and stick with your idea, and then either the others conform to it or it works as a counterpoint to that. It works
Right.
as a sort of, you know.
I think the idea of space is important anyway, because I always thought the space in between the notes or the beats is actually where the music lives.
Well, there's all sorts of references like that sometimes, yeah.
I think there was a scientific study done where there was a lot of brain activity that was going on in music listening in pauses and in space between certain notes or between passages and stuff. That space in between, there was an extraordinary amount of firing brain function happening, I think, at that point. So,
But only in Mixolydian.
right.
Well, you know,
never in Dorian.
it kind of brings me back to the old jazz tradition. You know, Count Basie would say, you know, we'd do a head. We didn't have anything written down, but there was a head that they would play, and that would turn into something like 1 o'clock jump.
Well, that's just stuff they rehearsed.
3 years
That's all.
from now, we'll start doing a few of those.
No,
but-
that's all. That's
Just a couple of vamps, right?
That's just stuff that they rehearsed, and you know. And
The jazz tradition, I think, is more geared toward that improvisational kind of playing.
Off of an idea, yeah.
As opposed to rock, which is, you know, verse, chorus, verse, and, you know, okay, somebody solo for 30 seconds here, and now we're going to go back to...
And we'll do that too. We'll work off of each other's patterns that we hear, but they may not come up at the beginning. They may come in the middle, or, you know, like 5 or 6 patterns in or something. And then other times we may work with it. We may decide to go completely against the flow for, you know, like Keith was talking about, for a counterbalance. And these guys will be playing in a certain beat, and I'll be completely off beat, you know, just to give it a little bit of an opposing sort of sound or something. So.
let's talk about influences a little bit for each of you. Now, you know, obviously, with the type of music that you do, you gotta listen to a large amount of, just a massive amount of music in order to soak all of that. But who do you keep going back to? Who are your main people? What are, you know, you just can't shake them, whatever it is, you know, for each of you.
Oh,
I can't tell you.
I wish you're
gonna say, "Oh,
Black Sabbath."
For me, it
Motley Crue.
No, my dad designed pipe organs and taught music at Catholic University and taught choral music. And I grew up with his record collection, which was all over the place. When I was a little kid, it was Wagner, Donald Erb, sometimes Stockhausen, Messiaen, Stravinsky, things like this. And when I became a teenager and started listening to rock, along came a band called the King Crimson, who were, and then later the next year, Magma, you know, groups that were using these influences, you know, that was like, that sounds like Orff or Wagner, you know, and King Crimson, you know, was overtly
A lot of Bartok.
Holst,
Yeah.
you know, and Bartok as well, just bam, like there it was. So then I was sold on, you know, playing electric music that was in that direction, and that's how I got started, you know, in the playing not in cover bands. So
Some of the names that he mentioned are the same influences, more from the 20th century composers, though certainly the Bartok and Stravinsky are two composers I always go back to. And they were my first, and Messiaen also. These were, when I was studying in the 70s composition and theory, these were the things that were brought to me as stuff to listen to, and you know, opened me up then, and it still does now. There's a world of music to find in it still. And they're great composers, and they've written great bodies of music. So I listen to those composers often, but many other composers now. Since then, in the 20th century, you know, in terms of if it's called classical music, but 20th century composers, serious music, I listen to a lot of Henri Dutilleux, a lot of Schnittke these days, Alfred Schnittke.
Gesundheit.
Yes. You know, there's many. I went through a period, when I was studying, I studied the theory books of Paul Hindemith, and so I still listen to that. I know they pronounce the name Hindemith, but no, that was a good influence.
was that before or after the Amar Quartet that he was in?
I think it was probably all before and after.
Yeah, he was in a band.
But you know, for the instrument that I played, there were also very direct influences, and the strongest was my first real influence, which was what made I actually started playing guitar, and I switched to bass in 1969 when I was a little kid and heard Cream, and I said, oh my God, this guy's doing some amazing stuff. And Jack Bruce was, and still is, my most profound influence on the instrument.
All right.
And for me, it was also those 20th century composers, Stravinsky and Messiaen and Shostakovich. But in rock music, Soft Machine, just when I heard them for the first time, I thought, that sounds really familiar. I couldn't explain it. It was, it seemed like I was coming home for the first time. And so Soft Machine, Zappa, I still remember where I was when I heard Peaches on Regalia for the first time. I was in my bedroom and it came on the radio, and it's like my world changed at that point.
On the radio.
See, he's lucky he was home.
Radio.
Oh, yeah.
On the radio.
Unbelievable.
Oh, man,
and I heard it,
yeah.
I went, what is that? I've never heard that before.
I think I heard it on AM radio.
And then for us, I know a lot of people talk about rock music in the United States just going downhill in the late 70s, but for us it was really exciting because we were listening to the Canterbury scene was starting, and Virgin Records was just starting out, and Paul worked at a record store in Gaithersburg where we lived, and he was ordering all these all these records coming in, Hatfield in the north and Lowell Coxhill, and we were just soaking that stuff up. And to us, that was a tremendous time for rock music when that music was coming out.
Well, I had to tell them who was going to buy these records before they'd let me order them. I got customers for these, trust me.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Getting your egg in your caravan.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Natural health.
Oh,
yeah.
You know.
Those I still keep
And
coming
Henry
back
Cowell
to.
was a big influence.
Yeah.
You know.
And old jazz too. My favorite sax player is still Jerry Mulligan on baritone sax, and I've got so much Jerry Mulligan at home, and Dave Brubeck on piano. I still keep coming back to those guys. It's good stuff.
And then part of that, which brings us together now, is that all of these influences were the same then for us. Also, Soft Machine was a big influence on me. They played in my local hometown when I was 13 years old and got to meet Robert Wyatt and Hugh Hopper and Mike Ratledge and Elton Dean.
Wow.
And so that was, I was studying with a guy who was working in a band that was doing Soft Machine as cover. They were covering Soft Machine. This was they were a high school band. This was before I was even in high school, and so this was the stuff that was influencing me also, and a lot of the jazz influences. My father was a jazz musician, though not in the time that I was alive. Before I was alive, my father was quite an old man when he had me. He was 56 when I was born, and he had been a clarinetist. So there was a lot of jazz music in his collection, and that was the earlier influences. And my brother's a jazz drummer, and also brought home all of the jazz, modern jazz that people were listening to, musicians mostly in the 60s and early 70s. So came the influences of Miles, Tony Williams,
Oh yeah, Miles.
certainly Charles Mingus, all the Coltrane stuff.
Yep.
Dolphy.
Dolphy, certainly. Thelonious Monk.
But because you think with a lot of that, you tend to go more toward like the Pharoah Sanders, Albert Ayler kind of Ornette Coleman.
That too, but that
Free
came,
jazz stuff.
Right.
One of the things about studying is you first got the base of the basics. You got it wasn't basic at all, but the more in stuff, the more stuff that was from sort of structured chord progressions, and then things that were coming, more from the outside, similar to what you were saying about the improvised stuff from ahead and then going completely off from there and not having any other.
Yeah, and none of that would have been possible had there not been the Duke Ellingtons and the Louis Armstrongs at the beginning that were writing everything down to the last note. And then you got guys like Mingus 10, 15, 20 years later that would come along and say, I know what I want to hear.
Right. Well, you got to
Well,
break
he was
those
still
rules a little
composing
bit.
Just
much, but
let
yeah.
it fly.
Yeah.
Well, he let the musicians that he was working with do more in shaping what became, the product of music that you would, listen to. That was his.
One of the things that we do here on the show, every once in a while, we'll get the local musicians, which I guess doesn't really count you much if you're out in New York.
All the way up there, yeah.
But I asked the two of these guys is that when the Muffins first started getting going, and mid 70s or so, we want to know what the local scene was like from your perspective.
Blues.
Because for us, the only thing that we knew of at the time was Happy the Man.
Well, a little bit before that, it was. It seemed like it was a little bit more experimental. I remember seeing Grits played around.
Yeah, I loved Grits.
Yeah, Grits were a really big influence on us, and they were kind of like older brothers and sisters, to us. And and they had a pretty good club following for a while. I remember seeing this one band at Fort Reno Park, Joy, the electronic music band. Which was like a...
I did sound for that gig.
Yeah, kind of like a Tangerine Dream kind of group.
Yeah,
but,
first synthesizer band I ever saw in my life.
But Paul's right, for the Washington area, it was a lot of blues and country rock kind of stuff. Good bands, though. I mean, I remember Sageworth and drums and...
Gatton.
And Danny Gatton and those guys. But for us, we really, it was very different for us. We just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, I think.
Well,
Yes, that's a fact.
In your history, kind of on, off, you guys are on again. You got something coming out anytime soon?
Well, we've been back together now longer than we were together in the first place.
Yeah, we just realized that last year.
We've been back together now for 10 years, this July. In fact, in a few days, the 16th, or it was this week.
I want to have a party.
10 years ago that we got back together.
I want to have an anniversary party. We have
Yeah,
cupcakes.
and unfortunately, there's such a limited there's fairly limited appeal in this country for what we do, and we now realize that, and it's not like we were back in the 70s where we were just beating our brains out trying to get gigs and so on. So now we don't do that anymore. We play the festival circuit, literally, and there's such limited opportunity for what we do. We record leisurely, and we make records. When we have time to get together and do them, when we make the time to get together and do these things. And then when we do get invited to play at a festival, it's planned 6 months in advance, and we shoehorn a bunch of time, to put together a show to go do the festival. And
but the Muffins do have a CD we're working on right now called Palindrome. Everything's done. The basic tracks are done. Drums and bass, keyboards. I just put the low horns down. Tom's putting the upper horns down right now, and we have just some mixing to do, and we're finished. But it's a long process.
Well, for our fans and your fans, where could they find out about it when it comes out?
Well, there's a Muffins website, themuffins.org. There's my website, which is paulsears.net, which has got more current information on it. So paulsears.net is a good place.
Okay. And then for Keith's project?
Well, my personal project, you'll have to find out through me, and I don't have a website. But for present, or present, I'll pronounce it that way, the next thing that's scheduled for us is to play in the RIO Festival next year. And Roger does have a website set up for present, any announcements of anything that he's going to be doing or composing for the band. I'm sure he'll put up. Sometimes with the composing stuff or new music, if there's anything that he'll do, I usually get the scores very late and then have to learn them within 5 days, so it's really hard. But
Yeah, it keeps your chops up.
Yeah, you got it.
keeps your reading up.
He's a fine composer.
Yeah, he's really brilliant.
Trigo.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for us. So definitely, we'd like to thank the Maximalists for being here. 1600.tv, as always, we love you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.